Dr. Abel Cunningham here, Bigfoot scientist. I'm not out in the field today because I've been doing some work on the old CJ behind me. But I thought I would take a break and read one of the witness encounters that I recently published on my website. So my website, www.603bigfoot.com. That's a place for the truth about Bigfoot in New Hampshire. I publish witness encounters from folks all around the state who are brave enough to send them in to me. And I appreciate their courage in coming forward and sharing their stories, and I especially appreciate this story because once you hear the story, you'll understand it really took a lot of courage to come forward with this. I won't spoil it, but you'll understand when I go into it. So this is from a young man who asked to go by the pseudonym Danny. I don't know if that's his real name or not, but we'll call him Danny for the purposes of this. So I'm going to read right from the email I received from him. Dr. Cunningham, thank you for the good work you do here in the great state of New Hampshire. It's about time we got credit for all the Bigfoot we have here. I agree. That's my life's mission. You know, the Granite State also is known as the Bigfoot State, and I'm just trying to make people aware of that fact. Back to the letter. I wanted to share an experience my buddy Danny and I had a few years ago. Please don't use my name, but I think it's important to share so that your followers can see how Bigfoot may have saved our lives, or at least saved our asses from getting kicked by a bunch of dumb rednecks. Sounds interesting. All right, let's dive in. Danny and I have been friends since first grade. This particular event happened a few years ago. When we were only a year or two out of college. We were both living within driving distance of the town we grew up in, and would occasionally get together to go fishing, grab a few beers, or whatever. Most of the time, it's what you'd expect when meeting up with an old buddy, complaining about work or significant others. But this particular time, something happened that I'll never forget. Well, it sounds familiar. You know, I get together with some old buddies from high school, college, usually go fishing and drink beer, talk about Bigfoot, that sort of thing. So I totally can relate so far. Danny and I have been friends since first grade. Oh, I already read that part, sorry. We both wanted to go fishing at the Setbacks. It's a spot on the river. It's almost like a little pond. It's barely moving and covered in lily pads. It's too shallow to get a boat in from the river. But if you have a 4x4, you can drive out a mile or so to get there. Back in high school, we used to have bonfires out there and go horn pouting late into the night. Yeah, same thing. I had similar experiences in high school. There was a place we'd go horn pouting, you know, poke some holes in a can of cat food, throw it out there, light a fire, and wait for the fish to start biting. We agreed to meet up at the Setbacks on a Friday afternoon. I was driving a crappy Hyundai at the time, so the plan was for me to park on the road, and we would drive Danny's Subaru Forester back to the fishing spot. We met up in the early afternoon and spent the rest of the afternoon fishing, drinking beer, and just catching up. Just about the time the sun started coming up, just about the time the sun started going down, that makes a lot more sense, we heard a couple of trucks making their way into the Setbacks. If you know what to listen for, it's pretty easy to hear drunken rednecks coming. The loud exhaust, the excessive revving, the hooting and hollering are all dead giveaways. That's what this sounded like. Yeah, I've had similar experiences. I remember camping out at an old mica mine one time with my buddies in high school, and we could hear these guys coming from a mile away, revving their engines, shooting guns out the window. You know, we started to get nervous, so I can understand if they're maybe a little bit on edge here. Anyway, sure enough, the first truck to pull in was a jacked up Chevy with a DIY paint job, smokestacks, and a Confederate flag flying from a pole mounted on the bumper. It pulled up right up next to the water where we were fishing. The second truck parked further back, near where we left the Forester and a stand of trees out of sight. As soon as I saw the Confederate flag, I started to get a little nervous. I've been around rednecks my whole life, and most of them are good folks. But when you are so ignorant and obnoxious that you knowingly fly the flag of racist losers in the Northeast of all places, that's a different breed. Well, I couldn't agree more. I mean, come on. First of all, it's one thing if you watch Dukes of Hazzard as a kid, like, you know, good old boys got a Confederate flag on their Dodge, no big deal. But this day and age, flying a Confederate flag in New Hampshire, of all places. I mean, my ancestors fought, died to, protect everything, protect the country from everything that traitor rag stands for. So when I see one of those flying around here, really gets me going. So I can relate to the emailer here. Back to the witness account. So I had another reason to be nervous. Danny is both Indian, from India, Indian, and openly gay. I didn't mention either of these till now because I don't think of him in those terms. To me, he's just Danny. I've known he was gay since the 4th grade, and it didn't matter to me any more than it does now. Back then, he wasn't very open about it, but as we've grown older, he's been less afraid to be himself. Well, good for Danny, I'm a heterosexual male myself, but to each his own. I don't think anyone should be discriminated against for their skin color or sexual preferences. Really, for any reason other than if you're flying a Confederate flag like a total redneck loser. That would be the only reason I would discriminate against you, and then that's your own choice. Anyway, back to the story. Which is great. However, I was nervous that the various LGBTQ and gay pride bumper stickers on the Forester, together with Danny's dark skin, may be enough to set off these displaced Confederate fanboys. Yeah, I'd be nervous about that too. I didn't have to wait long to find out that I was right. The Rednecks didn't even start unloading their gear before they greeted us with a friendly, "What's up, faggots?" Man, I don't know. That's just awful. Sorry that you had to go through that. We pretended not to hear, but ignoring them did not make them go away. The taunts continued and were about as creative as you'd expect. Do you guys take turns using each other's rods? Doug, the gay boy, has a bigger rod than you. It's not the size of the rod that matters, it's what you do with it. That was Doug's response, I guess. You get the idea, 5th grade stuff. Ridiculous. We see so much 5th grade stuff in the country over the past couple of years. Politics, everywhere else. It's like, we're supposed to be a civilized society. We gotta grow up, people. Anyway, back to the story. Danny and I played all sorts of sports together, and we've been in a few fist fights before. We can both handle ourselves, but we were outnumbered 6-2, and at least one of the Rednecks was carrying. He had a big revolver strapped to his leg to go with his stupid black cowboy hat. Another dead giveaway of someone who is not the sharpest tool in the shed. You're wearing a cowboy hat when you don't have any cattle in New Hampshire. We didn't want to look like cowards, but when they started casting with the intention of crossing and tangling our lines, we decided it was time to make an exit before the Rednecks got the fight they clearly wanted. That was probably a smart move. Discretion is the better part of valor and all that. Without saying a word, we packed up our stuff and headed for the Forester. The taunts continued, and they started throwing pebbles at us as we were walking away. I was scared, but I could tell Danny was more enraged than afraid. When one of the pebbles hit him in the back of the neck, I thought he was going to turn around and charge, despite being outnumbered and unarmed, but he kept his composure. When we got back to the stand of trees, the rage turned up a notch when we realized that the second truck had parked directly behind the Forester, intentionally blocking us in. We tried to act calm, cool, and collected. We put our fishing stuff in the Forester, and as we turned to walk back towards the Rednecks, we saw them approaching us. "Would you mind moving your truck, please?" Danny asked, in a remarkable display of manners. "Battery's dead," said the Redneck named Doug as he spit out a brown stream of tobacco juice. "We have jumper cables," Danny said. "Do you want to jump me, gay boy?" Doug said, generating laughter from his dentally challenged compadres. "Whatever it takes," Danny said as he opened the rear liftgate and started rummaging around. So I assumed he was looking for the jumper cables, but when he handed me the jack handle and held my glance for just a bit too long, I knew exactly what he had in mind. "Found them," Danny said, turning around with a smile and holding the jumper cables. "Yeah, I'd love to jump you, Doug." With that, he swung the jumper cables around like a nunchuck-wielding ninja and caught Doug in the side of the face with both terminals. and followed that up with a quick kick to the nuts. You know, I appreciate Danny's guts and his ability to improvise in a fight. That's one of the best ways to win a fight. If you sign up for my Bigfoot self-defense courses, that's one of the first things we'll teach you is improvisation, how to use what you have at hand to fend off, a Bigfoot that is clearly stronger, faster, and tougher than most people are. So it's a good tactic when you're outnumbered as well. Doug yelped like a cat after getting. Doug yelped like a dog after getting swiped by a cat across the nose, stumbled back and sat down, his dip falling out of his bleeding mouth and tumbling down onto his fat belly. The jumper cables had opened a gash that went from his ear almost to his chin. Good job, Danny. There was a moment of stunned silence. I raised the jack handle and assumed a fighting stance. Who's next? Danny asked, swinging the jumper cables around in a figure-8 motion. That's when I heard the unmistakable clack of a revolver hammer being pulled back. You are, said the revolver-carrying redneck from the back. Get on your knees and put your arms behind your head. Well, this is a cool story. I mean, I don't know how Bigfoot comes into it, but even now it's a pretty cool story. Anyway, back to it. My eyes were locked on the gunman as Billy went back to the other truck. Doug was sitting still, stupidly staring at his own blood dripping into his hands. The other 3 rednecks were shuffling around, speaking in soft voices amongst themselves. Just then, a blood-curdling scream erupted from the direction of Billy and the other truck, and then a loud splash. Billy, stop fucking around and get over here, the gunman yelled, trying valiantly not to let his nerves show in his words. There was more silence, shuffling, spitting of dip. Billy, what the hell is going on? Get over here. I can't hold this gun forever. Now the nerves were starting to show in his voice. He was trying to keep his eyes on us, and he was doing a pretty good job of it for a while. But when Billy didn't respond, he half turned back towards the other truck, still pointing the gun in our general direction. Joe, or Andy, can one of you, he started to say. He started to say, but he was interrupted when his own toolbox came hurtling through the air and struck him in the chest. Holy cow. How did that happen? Maybe this is where Bigfoot comes in. Here, I should clarify that this isn't your typical hairy homeowner toolbox we're talking about. This is one of the ones that goes across the bed of a pickup truck just behind the cab. It was made of diamond-plated steel and probably weighed 50 pounds before there were even any tools in it. This one was full of tools, I know, because they all went flying when it made impact with the gunman's chest. Whatever threw that thing must have been Superman strong, because it came from behind a tree line that was at least 30 yards away. Yeah, that's crazy strength, but I've heard similar witness encounters of Bigfoot throwing very heavy things for very long distances. There's other encounters on my website about fishermen who were attacked by Bigfoot, throwing giant rocks at them across a lake. Anyways, it makes sense. And we didn't have time to think about the physics of the toolbox at the time, however. Before anyone could give it a second thought, there was an indescribable roar that came from the direction of the trees. The best way that I can describe it, the roar, is that I felt it in my chest as much as I heard it in my ears, if that makes any sense. Yeah, it makes total sense. I've heard that roar myself, and it's like the closest thing to describe it is like explosion, except lower and slower. Then this giant creature walked into the little clearing. It was either Bigfoot or it was Shaquille O'Neal wearing the world's best Bigfoot costume. Danny is 6'2", I'm 6 foot even, and this thing made us feel like malnourished children. It was at least 7 feet tall and had shoulders like The Rock. Oh, and it was covered head to foot with reddish brown hair. Yeah, that sounds just like Bigfoot. I don't know what else that would be. The 3 rednecks who remained standing began to sprint back towards the road, away from the trucks and this giant creature. In just a few strides, the beast overtook them. The slowest of the 3 got an open hand slap to the back of his head, so forceful it face planted him directly into the mud. The other 2 were scooped up like toddlers attempting to escape their mother in a supermarket. Except they weren't treated quite as gently as the mother would treat her toddler in a supermarket. Bigfoot alternately smashed them to the ground and off trees as he made his way back to the setbacks until they stopped squirming and squealing. Then they were chucked into the water where we could now see Billy's body floating amongst the lily pads. Intense. We followed the creature around from a distance, dumbfounded, but also somehow sensing that we were safe. The whole time, Doug was still sitting in the original spot, alternately rubbing his groin and wiping his face. As the beast approached with us behind it, he started to cry and screech like a piglet. Bigfoot started towards him, but Danny piped up. Please, may I? He asked politely. Bigfoot seemed to understand and allowed Danny to move forward. Yeah, it's a common theme with Bigfoot. Like, they don't, it's almost like they know what you're trying to say, even if they may not understand the English language. It's like telepathy or something like that. Anyway, Bigfoot seemed to understand and allowed Danny to move forward. Homophobic, racist asshole, Danny said as he walked right up to Doug. He slapped Doug in the face, then clipped the jumper cables to his ears, causing another squeal from Doug. Looking back to me, he said, "Remember what we used to do to bullies like this?" And the glimmer in his eye made it clear exactly what he had in mind. "Wedgie?" I said. "I think an atomic wedgie is appropriate in this situation. Would you agree?" Danny said. "Yep," I concurred. "I agree. Nothing better than a wedgie to take a bully down a few notches. It's a tool that's close to being forgotten in this day and age, and I think more people could benefit from having a wedgie." Back to the story. As Danny began to pull Doug's underwear up over his head, eliciting more yelps, Bigfoot made grunting noises that could only be described as a chuckle. Bigfoot went back to the revolver guy, just regaining consciousness under his own toolbox, and pulled the toolbox off. Then Bigfoot grabbed him by his tighty whities and hoisted him high into the air. Still holding the redneck high in the tree, Bigfoot walked over to the closest tree, snapped off a branch with his free hand, and hung the former gunman from the branch by his underwear. He hung there, sobbing and looking utterly pathetic and helpless. After that, Bigfoot went back to the truck that was blocking us in and flipped it over on its side, giving us enough room to get by. We watched as he went back to the other truck and pushed it deep into the water. Only the Confederate flag was visible, sticking just barely out of the swampy water, which seems like a good place for it, which I would agree with. As he was departing, I could have sworn Bigfoot held up 2 fingers and a peace sign, but I could have just imagined it. The way this was covered in the local news was that it was a tragic accident involving youngsters who were drinking too much and crashed their trucks off-roading. Besides me and Danny, the only survivor was the guy who had been left hanging from his underwear in a tree. And I don't think he will be telling anyone what really happened anytime soon. Yeah, probably not. I don't think he would. I wouldn't tell that story if Bigfoot gave me an atomic wedgie, but you never know. Anyway, please feel free to share this on your website. I think we should all be more like Bigfoot. Don't judge people for their skin color or sexual preference, and don't be afraid to stand up to racists, homophobes, and other bullies. Regards, proud to be saved by Bigfoot. So I hope you enjoyed this encounter. I encourage everyone to stay safe out there. Be careful when you're near rocks, trees, and water. That's where Bigfoot likes to snatch people. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Thanks again. This is Abel Cunningham, Bigfoot scientist, signing out. Over and out.